It's me again. You made it. The few, the proud, the brave. I know this is a long conference to sit through, and it's different from other conferences in that you don't get a break. And you get to listen to topics that you're not an expert in, and maybe you weren't interested in the beginning, like insurance. And then by the end, you're like, okay, this actually does impact what happens, what housing is built, how housing can be provided, and things like that. And so this is kind of what this panel is about. It's about a few things that we don't think about, mainly education and how that plays into the housing space. A few notes in that we did have a speaker lined up, Marcus from Bend. Unfortunately, he did have a bit of a emergency and could not attend. So his slides aren't there, but if you'd like to be connected with him at some point, Bend is doing a lot of innovative things as a group of school, districts. And so unfortunately, we're not able to talk about that today. So this is our panel. School is in. And I had a little bit of a lengthy introduction trying to say, well, there is a connection between education and schools and real estate and housing. And perhaps more tenuously, there is also a connection to climate change. But conveniently this morning, there was an article in the LA Times, which I think summarizes everything far more than I could myself. So I'm just going to read you the title of the article and then a little quote from it. So the article was titled Fire, Lack of Students, Teacher Layoffs Inside Pasadena's Unified Struggle to Stay Solvent. So this is really putting together kind of everything that we're going to talk about. For years, Pasadena Unified has been besieged by financial issues, a district that was about home to 21,000 students in 2005 now has less than 14,000. The exodus, fomented by a lack of affordable housing in the area, an abundance of charter school options, and a competitive private school market, has led to the closure of 5 district campuses since 2018. So what we're seeing in LA, which unfortunately can sometimes be a pallbearer of what we see in Oregon, is that you have neighborhoods that have become so unaffordable that a lot of the families there go to private schools. And what's left of that school district struggling is now being tackled by fire. So when those school districts lose what resources they have, they're having trouble coming back from that. And we can think in terms of community impact, in terms of rebuilding, what that means for inclusive neighborhoods, for families having access to opportunity, and kind of what the future of free public education means to our communities. So with that, let's at least start the conversation. Let's talk about this. So we have a number of wonderful speakers here today to start this conversation. So first, we want to talk about influence. How does a school district, how does the interaction of the school district with those children and the families that live around the areas influence what gets built, at least from an affordable developer's perspective? Second, what is this impact? So school disparity and coordination implications as seen through the provision of services. Does that differ from school district to school district? And what's the cost of that? Finally, a story of action, something really hopeful to leave you all on. And that's going to be told in 2 parts. I'm not going to give it all away so that you all can maybe get a little excited, get the blood flowing, keep you awake for this last little segment. Then also, we're going to have a number of solutions, some a little bit more practical, some, affordable developer centric, but then also some policy focused to get you all thinking about how these 2 communities, and I also mentioned that at least from what I can see, education advocates and teachers unions have some time and political power in their, back pocket. So maybe if we're having trouble passing some things with our own ability to coordinate and get out there and really put our feet to the pavement and protest what we need to, maybe if we have some additional people in capacity, we can work together to get some more things done. So with that, I'm going to hand it to you, Trell.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Trell Anderson. I'm the Executive Director at Northwest Housing Alternatives. Thanks for staying late on a Friday afternoon. Really appreciate it. Thank you. So at Northwest Housing Alternatives, we're a nonprofit based here in Oregon. We're located in Milwaukee, but we work statewide. I won't read these bullets by bullet, but we are a leading housing developer and owner of affordable housing across the state. Um, oh, I was about to say next slide, but you got the power. We we have kind of three pillars to our work. One of them is affordability, obviously. The other is sustainability, which we heard some talking about. But the third certainly is our equity work and our equity lens. And so I wanted to give a little bit of framing when we talk about the intersection between housing, affordable housing, and education. We're looking through our equity lens, and this is a map of our equity lens where we're considering the people who live in our housing, the place where our housing is located, our partners, and then also what's the process that we go through to identify a site and develop affordable housing. This has been updated, but this was the framework for so much that we do. So this slide doesn't quite fit, but I just wanted to offer this for a little bit of scale in terms of the housing production that we do. We try to bring two affordable housing properties online every year. So at any time we have two properties in the concept stage, two properties in the planning stage, two in the finance stage, two in the construction stage, two in the lease up stage, and two in the conversion stage. So I just wanted to offer that in terms of our scale and what we're trying to achieve. And again, we do this statewide. In the last 6 years, we've celebrated grand openings in Ontario and Warrenton, Tigard, 3 here in the Portland area. Yesterday, we did a groundbreaking event on North Interstate, or it was Wednesday, North Interstate, a senior project we're very proud of, kicking off M. Carter Commons in partnership with the Urban League of Portland. Next slide. This is how we, a little bit of application of our equity lens, again, to as we apply it to site selection. Considering the people we serve, the places where our properties will be located, the partnerships, and then our process. So my role here was to give kind of an example then of how this comes into play. And I'm afraid what I've got is examples of really how we use our equity lens and how we kind of walk through that. So this first site, for example, this was a site that Metro had purchased through the Metro. Is anybody left here from Metro? I just want to make sure I don't offend. Okay. So Metro had acquired the site, and they obviously want it to be part of their affordable housing development process. Very thoughtful. And this, my hand script here, it's the box in red. It's on Barber Boulevard. So they issued it out for a request for proposals, and we, found a partner in Hacienda CDC and went and visited the site, and we were very excited about it. And Metro wants to see more family housing produced through the Metro bond. So all great. And then we went and walked the site, and we noticed that there was a school right next door. You can't really see it in this slide, but you can see it in the little black hash mark. And we realized that's why Metro thought it was such a great idea. Literally a school next door. However, there was a 8-foot tall chain link fence separating the two. Back in my day, we would have cut that immediately and had easy access. But as a developer, I knew better than to, try to approach PPS as the institution and have an early conversation about that. It wouldn't go well. But then we were trying to figure out, well, if this is family housing, how will the kids get to school? If this chain link fence is here. And what we realized is you had to walk all the way back out. You had to walk out to Barber. and walk all the way back around to, I don't know, it turns out it's about a 4 block walk that includes walking on Barber, walking on Capitol Highway before you get to the front door of the school. More than half, it's like 3/4 of a mile. And none of it was improved. No sidewalks. And so in this part of Barber Boulevard, if you've been out there, the speed limit is 45 miles an hour, but people are zipping around that curve coming into town. There's no transit stop there. There's nothing to slow. It's not pedestrian oriented at all. So just from that perspective alone, oh, here's the other part. It's a transit oriented development site. I know there's a table of urban planners, MERP students here, right? TOD is a great thing, except for, when you have lower income families and there's no parking requirements. And so families who have kids need to be able to get their kids to after school activities, and having a car and having that mobility and that flexibility is a big deal. And so between the very limited parking and the very, very scary pedestrian environment that was, we would think families would be, I couldn't imagine pushing a stroller with a baby along Barber and Capitol Highway. We decided not to apply for this site for family housing. It was really disappointing to us. And we gave feedback back to Metro that this is a great site for senior housing. But we didn't think through our equity lens, and just speaking from the experience of residents, that this is not a great site at all for family housing, even though it has proximity right next to an elementary school. It just didn't make sense to us. Okay, the next site. Anybody from Wilsonville in the room? Okay. So this one, there's the transit center in Wilsonville. So this is suburban community. We have a senior property in Wilsonville. We have a family property in Wilsonville, which Natalie will reference in a moment. But so the city of Wilsonville and the transit agency there called for a request for proposals for family housing at the transit center, which sounds great. It's very well connected, et cetera, et cetera. We went to do the site visit. It was immediately to the left of the site is small industry complex. Immediately to the right of the site is a great big parking lot. And my immediate reaction again was, well, I can't imagine being an owner or a parent where my child is subject to light industry when they're out of the house, or a bus mall, or a parking lot. That was literally like right out the front door. Also, nothing within walking distance in terms of grocery or schools or any kind of library or amenities. And so once again, while the great idea of co-locating, in this case, transportation opportunities and family housing sounds great conceptually, at the site level, if again, looking through the lens of somebody who's going to live there, it just didn't work. It wouldn't work for families. No parking requirements at all. So that's a little bit of the analysis that we tend to think of. The segue here to, if we can't find a good site, it's really difficult to find a good site in terms of schools and good schools and opportunities to learn. How do we do our programming then to make up for it? And this is where I hand it to my colleague, Natalie Thompson, who is our Director of Programs and Equity. And one of the properties that we have where we do this programming is just south of, where am I? Yeah, just south of this, right across the street from an elementary school and a middle school in Wilsonville.
Thanks, Trell. Okay, it's a little chilly in here, so I'm a little shaky. So if I teeth chatter a little bit, it's just because I'm cold. But as Trell said, I'm Natalie Thompson. I am the Director of Programs and Equity for Northwest Housing Alternatives, and I'm here to talk about the connections between our housing development and our services. So to give you a little bit of context about NHA and our resident services, we do about close to 3,000 services for families a year. And so this could be anything from food distribution to connection to some of our initiatives, which I'll go into in a little bit, to rent assistance and other types of educational supports. As you can see, okay, you going to do my clicker? Thank you. As you can see, we give about 840 food boxes away across the state. We, as resident services, we help to prevent evictions. And so we've got about a 93% success rate in making sure that we can keep our individuals and families housed. And we have a resident advisory council. And so this is a council made up of residents across our portfolio who really have an opportunity to contribute to all of the things that we do at NHA, from our housing development to our initiatives and services, and to provide us with insight on what are their current emerging needs and how can we shift what we're doing as an organization to meet their current needs. And it's also a direct connection to our board. Many of the folks that have been on our resident advisory council are also now on our board of directors. So they are now making decisions for their own life, which is kind of awesome. And they give us input on all of our initiatives, which I'll go into in just a moment. One of the other things that we do within resident services is we do a lot of data collection. It's really important to us that we understand on a fairly regular basis what is the effectiveness of our services. That what are we putting our resources into, our money, our time, our capacity, and does it have the desired impact that we want it to on the folks that we're serving? So we do that in a number of different ways, but quarterly we do housing stability assessments where we really look at each household and understand how they're doing. Are they seeking services? Are they rent burdened? Are they behind? Do their families have what they need? And we also do a yearly survey where we ask them questions about their education, if they feel like they have education supports, if they have connections to healthy food, if they feel like resident services is providing them with the information that they need in order to stay stably housed. We then use this on a yearly basis to have really in-depth conversations with our resident services coordinators so that they can begin to shift and enhance the services that they have at the property. So I say this to all say that data collection is important to us, the resident impact is important to us, and that helps us to make sure that the initiatives that we have are actually successful. So I'm going to go into some of them now. Slide, please. So some of our top initiatives are climate resiliency, supporting educational success, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, and seniors' health and housing. So with climate resiliency, it is our goal to make sure that our residents are as well equipped to handle a disaster if and when it were to happen. So we do events, we have an emergency preparedness training that we're doing. We're working with Home Forward with their emergency preparedness toolkit. We are creating pantries and emergency cabinets wherever we can possibly put an emergency preparedness kit in each one of our properties, and so that our residents don't have to worry about, is the property manager there, is resident services there, and they have the tools they need in order to just, if they need lights, if they need batteries, if they need a generator, something that they would need until other emergency services can arrive. We also do this in the summertime. We have an air conditioning project where we make sure that our vulnerable community members have access to air conditioning so that, when the temperature's like 99 degrees, they have a cool place to be. And we're also working with other groups within our organization to make sure that our properties are well equipped in times of emergency. I'm going to skip to our seniors' health and housing, and then we'll go back to supporting educational success. With this, we're really working on the connections between seniors being able to age in place and that they are able to enjoy their housing as they age and connect with resident services. As their needs change, resident services can begin to shift and transform to make sure that their services are really tailored to what those seniors need. So we do that through transportation supports. We do that through connections to healthcare, and we make sure that they understand their benefits. For us, success is a senior being able to maintain their housing stability or improve their housing stability as they age. And that means increased services for our seniors as they continue to live in one of our properties. So moving on to supporting educational success, we have a number of properties, family properties, where we provide this service, and it shows up in a number of different ways. One of them is our after-school programming, and we serve about 500 students a year, and it's about once a week where students will come and they will meet with our Jesuit volunteer as well as our resident services coordinator and local community volunteers who come to provide support to these kids. So some of those activities include helping with homework. We do STEM projects. We bring in local businesses, or we brought in the fire department to talk about, future plans. What do you want to do when you graduate from high school? We are looking at programming that not only serves our youngest students, but also is really focusing on our high school students and continuing to grow that program. And we've been able to expand the program, and we plan on continuing to expand the program to all of our family housing, because we've seen that it's been a very big success in the graduation rates for our seniors, as well as our students being able to move from each grade level on time. Next slide. Oh man, you're already there. Okay, thank you. We do this also by making sure that we stay connected to the local schools, to teachers. We've also recognized that when students are engaged with our Supporting Educational Success program, the rest of their family members also begin to engage with resident services a lot deeper. And so this one time a week that they get to spend with resident services has been able to help the family grow and get more connected and more familiar with resident services. And we see there's a correlation between those students participating and those families having stronger housing stability. It also creates a culture of excitement around education. And that's something that we want to continue to foster with our students. And we also make sure to track over the year that those students are able to move from grade level to grade level. And if we are seeing that they're falling behind, we want to make sure that we're connecting with them deeper. We want to make sure we're connecting with their teachers and the schools to see what else we can do in order to make their education journey a success. This is all sort of materialized in NHA currently has a 99% success rate of children being able to move from grade level to grade level, and 99% of all of our high school students have graduated on time. The state average for graduation is 81.8%. So we have seen over time that when kids are engaged in these after-school programs, when kids have a focus and people who are speaking with them about what are the next steps, how can I help, how can I support, there's an actual correlation to them being able to move forward and feel like they have what they need in order to do it. And as Trell was talking about, our Autumn Park property, the Wilsonville High School, has a 94% graduation rate, and Autumn Park has a 99%. So overall, we're doing a good thing. Amazing. And I think it's on my last slide. That is my last slide. So basically, I want to say that when you really are focused on where you're building housing, how it's connected to the school system, and you're also providing those resources, there is a major difference that we can have for these families and these students and their success. And not only does our supporting educational success have a positive impact on our students, but it has a really positive impact on those families and their housing stability. So thank you. Great.
There you go.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Krista Palmer. I live in Ashland. I've lived there for almost 5 years. I have a son. He goes to Ashland. He's second grader in Ashland School District. I have a background in occupational therapy. One of the tenets of occupational therapy is around what we call occupational justice. And that's essentially ensuring what we can do so that people can do the things that they need to, right? So that can be anything from having food to eat that's accessible, transportation, access to medical care, and housing. Housing is absolutely included in that. And a lot of you are probably familiar with the requirements for accessible housing and how that affects people's lives. One of the ways that I have seen it over the years is just how our built environment and particularly housing can affect so many areas of occupation for an individual, not just their physical well-being, and specifically for children. So I'm here to share about a project I have the privilege of working on in Ashland. So in 2023, the then Ashland School District Superintendent created a committee led by school board members to discuss and problem solve ways to address what they identified as a decades-long trend in decreasing enrollment in Ashland. Ashland is a town of about 21,000 people. And while there are families, the number of families in Ashland is lowest than all of Jackson County, and it has been decreasing over time. Ashland also is known to be, well, I've learned that it has been known to be or thought of as a rich community. And while that is definitely true for some of the population, some of the residents, all of Ashland School District they're all Title I schools, which means that there's a significant portion of those students who are experiencing some level of poverty, which almost always includes housing insecurity. So drawing from observation and reports on the increasing cost of housing in Ashland, as well as data indicating that a large percentage of currently enrolled students reside within the lower cost subsidized or multifamily housing in town, the committee decided to explore the feasibility and benefits of supporting the development of affordable housing upon an underused parcel of school district-owned land. So I came on as a committee member, a volunteer, parent. I just really was hoping to apply my experience and just see how I could help move this idea forward or learn from it. So one of the things that I was tasked with was researching other school districts who have performed similar projects. And so largely informing this project were examples of mostly California-based school district housing initiatives, which have demonstrated stability and retention for the staff and some for families who benefit. Most of the projects that have been done have been focused on staff housing, but one of the anchors for this was around housing for families. 3 best practices that have anchored the pursuit of this project were drawn from a 2021 UCLA and UC Berkeley report called Education Workforce Housing in California, Developing the 21st Century Campus, which highlights the importance of using surplus district property for the district staying as far from the construction and property management as possible, and trying to leverage the development to bring in revenue for the district. So those are 3 kind of key factors that the committee identified in order to move forward with this project. Paired that with, the school district acknowledging that its primary focus should be on education, as well as unfortunate looming budget limitations, not unlike so many school districts across the country right now. So it was determined that the best course of action was in order to pursue the feasibility of this project, was to form a nonprofit to perform the roles of project manager, community engagement, facilitation, and funding for operations. So out of that, Sunstone Housing Collaborative was created. That's the nonprofit that was formed. I chose the name just because I found out that was the stone of Oregon, and I thought it was really beautiful. And collaborative because that is a core tenet of how we're pursuing this project. So we created that at the end of 2023. And the board of directors on Sunstone intentionally includes 2 school board members to provide oversight and ensure that the district's best interests are maintained as priority. So the proposed housing project will be built upon land that the school district currently owns. Other collaboration or benefits to the school district could be a potential long-term land lease agreement with the developer to ensure an income stream for the district, as well as a vested interest in deed restrictions when it comes to ensuring housing affordability. Additionally, one thing that we're really excited about is with Sunstone's support, if needed, to have potential for relationships between the community and the school district and the housing provider to continue to provide stability and opportunity for staff and families, as well as the supportive programming through resident services. So unfortunately, our superintendent was unable to attend today, but he left me with a quote in his continuing support. So we received a new superintendent in the midst of this project being implemented. And fortunately, our new superintendent is very enthusiastically supportive. And he says, when schools and community partners collaborate, we create stronger, more resilient communities where students, families, and districts thrive. By aligning efforts, we can turn challenges such as access to education and declining enrollment into opportunities and build a future that serves everyone. Oh, you went through. Okay. That's okay. So I just wanted to share a little bit about the community partnerships that we've built. One of the core pieces of this project is ensuring local participation and local partnerships. So foundational initially was, Jackson County and specifically Ashland is a childcare desert. It's next to impossible to move to Ashland if you have a young family or if you are planning on becoming a parent to find childcare for your own child. So I pursued a relationship and a partnership with the Oregon Child Development Coalition. They currently have a Head Start program run out of a decommissioned school in the north of Ashland. And the director, Jeff Lowry, is just amazing and has a real vision for cohesive communities, connecting children with the adults that care for them and the services that their family needs. And he draws a lot from the model of purpose-built communities in Atlanta. So they're going to provide co-located childcare within the development, and I'm really excited about that. Also connected with Ashland Supportive Housing, which is an organization that provides housing support for adults with disabilities. So that's, as we heard earlier, there's a huge need for accessible housing in Oregon, and particularly in Ashland for adults that have the potential to live independently, but there's just nowhere for them to go. So it'd be great to be able to provide support for that. We've also participated in Jackson County Long-Term Recovery Group meetings and networking, and working on some informational session events next year, which is really exciting. Housing Development Center provided technical assistance to us throughout the RFP process. Housing Oregon, has statewide collaboration and advocacy. We have local architect, construction company, and a newly formed community land trust that are participating in this project. And speaking to Jean's comment on legislation, my board chair has been in conversations with Rep. Pam Marsh, and as our representative, she's made evident her commitment to supporting housing justice in Oregon. So we've been talking with her just about how new legislation might be formed in Oregon that explicitly supports the development of school district initiated affordable housing, similar to California Assembly Bill 2295, which provides explicit, just oversight or allowances. Sorry, I don't understand the complexities of it, but it makes it easier for school districts to develop housing, essentially. So I'm going to skip over a little bit, but I essentially just want to encourage anyone who is in a similar situation or knows anyone that, with any change, especially one that springs from innovation or brings the unknown, it's inevitable to encounter pushback and misinformation. The proposal of this project has definitely not come without detractors and skepticism. Partly part of that is on myself because, I didn't come to this with a background in housing development. But I understand people and I understand how environments affect people and their communities. And that is a driving force in my participation in this project. And I think it's really important. And I wish more OTs would get involved in housing. But, one of the most significant strengths of this endeavor is the partnerships that have been formed. That is why this is moving forward. There are so many people in the community and people that support our community that are committed to making this happen. And that's a really exciting thing to be a part of. I'm going to leave you with a quote from our planning director in Ashland, Brandon Goldman. He says, "I appreciate the work Sunstone is doing to provide much needed housing in Ashland. These efforts reflect a shared goal of creating more opportunities for people to live and thrive in our community. As housing challenges continue to grow, collaboration between the city and organizations like Sunstone is more important than ever. Working together, we can explore creative ways to expand housing options by looking at potential sites, different funding strategies, and zoning pathways. The city can help navigate some of the logistical challenges and identify opportunities that make projects more feasible. Keeping an open dialogue and sharing resources will be key to moving these efforts forward. As you know, new housing developments often face opposition from neighborhoods concerned about change, even when those projects align with community goals. Having strong voices from housing advocates at public meetings can help balance the conversation. Hearing testimony from those who support affordable housing and can speak to the broader benefits, whether it's meeting workforce needs, supporting local businesses, increasing family housing, or boosting student enrollment at the school district, can make a real difference in shaping public perception and decision-making. I look forward to continuing the conversation and finding ways to support Sunstone's work in making housing more accessible in Ashland.
I'm a stand-up. I'm sorry. Is that all right? It's like the end of the day on a Friday. It's at that time. But this is it's a perfect handoff because this is a project that has become, and from the very onset has been very personal to myself and to our firm. Oh, yeah, nice, solid. There we go. I'll put that there. Before I begin, my name is Matt Edlen of Edlen and Company, formerly Girding Edlen. Many of you in this room may have heard of our predecessor firm and know our work Our focus predominantly through Girding Edlen was around environmental sustainability. We've been known as one of the world's leaders in that. In fact, just completing the world's largest and first commercially financed living building. So if you go down to First and Pine, you can take a look at that. In 2019, we made a big switch. We'd always had a big piece of our business that was focused on public-private partnerships, capital A affordable, work specifically around impacting the world of social sustainability and housing affordability. In 19, myself, Jill Sherman, who I think many of you know in this room, Mark Edlen, my father, and Roger Craig, we formed Edlen and Company with the distinct focus to back in on creating what we saw in the environmental space, a scalable solution or scalable opportunities to infuse environmental sustainability in the built environment, to really look at how do we create scalable, lasting solutions around housing affordability and housing attainability. That has led us through a lot of different paths, in particular, the paths of public-private partnerships. And in this case, this is an incredible example of what it means when a public institution sees and assesses a problem and goes out and says, okay, with open arms, we need help. How can we work together to solve a very critical need? And this whole idea of education and real estate, this inextricably linked component between these two things, oftentimes go overlooked. Gene and I sat down. We had like a 30-minute prep call together. We're like getting to know each other. That was 2.5 hours, I think. I'm like, we ran through lunch, we ran through everything. We're just on the phone talking about something that, again, we don't think about. As we think about developing buildings, we think about where are the markets and all of this. We don't think about, hey, what happens if a community now doesn't have people going to school there, and then fast forward to the point where now we're shutting down schools. Oh, now there are no schools. And then guess what? After that community is now retired or moved on or what have you, we don't have any schools. What the hell are we going to do? Like, who wants to live in a place where you don't even have access to basic public education? That's a problem. And that's a problem that's happening in Ashland. This is, like I said, it's personal. My wife is fifth generation Ashland. She went to school at Ashland High. My brother-in-law went to school at Ashland High. My mother-in-law went to school at Ashland High. My father-in-law, and so far down the line. My brother-in-law is a teacher. He's a teacher in Jackson County. He cannot afford to live in Ashland because, frankly put, it's not affordable. Your medium family home price is now up north of, it's well north of $500,000. You're talking more in that like $600,000 to $700,000 range. Can't afford that. You look at the numbers. In fact, it was interesting. One of Krista's colleagues sent out, we were on our meeting the other day, and he sent out this graph, and I was like, holy, this is funny. This is because it begins, it's also really depressing for an elder millennial to look and see that a 50-year timeline begins about when you were in kindergarten. So you're like on that chart there. But what it looked at was the enrollment in 1993, when my wife was walking into kindergarten in Ashland Public Schools, to forecasting to 2030. There were 3,500 students back in 1993. That number is now declining and will decline by 2030 to less than 2,500. We're talking at least 1,300 to 1,400 students in a town of 2,100 people. They've closed 3 elementary schools in that period of time. This problem that they're facing, and what was such I think, an incredible thing to see, is they're looking at it going, we need to look at all opportunities to be able to salvage this school system. A school system which, when my wife went to college, she was telling somebody about their, hey, did you guys, the stained glass program at our elementary or at our school was amazing, and our beading and our metal shop. And they're like, what private school did you go to? And she's like, no, this is just public school. This is what we do. Like, it was an incredible school district, but it's on the decline. The average age is almost 50. Not that it's old. I'm not saying it's old. I'm just saying that at 50, we're not talking spring chickens, and we're not talking about young kids going into those schools. It's a problem. And in a town that my wife lovingly calls 5 square miles surrounded by reality, It has become a bastion for folks looking to retire. It's got incredible arts, incredible restaurants, New York Times, top tier restaurants. It's a wonderfully fabulous place to retire because you can afford to retire there if you have the funds to do so, but you can't afford to have a family there. So that's where this project came about. The site, ooh, here we go. Which, skip around here. We'll just do a little skippity doo. So this property, I should have put a map in here. This is actually located on a piece of district property that currently houses, it's a soccer field if you squint. It's an underutilized field, really. More on that later because that becomes the big controversy in this whole endeavor. But this is an underutilized field. The district, as Krista was talking about, spent a considerable amount of time, brought in and worked with Krista and her team to establish a not-for-profit specifically to help the district assess and understand the best solutions going forward, to then put out an RFP, of which for us, we saw as this is a really, really important opportunity for us to chase, where we can bring our private sector expertise to work in collaboration with the district to help together identify and solve what are those critical problems that the district is facing today and into the future, and how can a real estate development help serve those? So going back, we began with this, and this is kind of what I got. And I apologize, I got a little wonkadoo here, but like we got this RFP, and what we gleaned from that are key pieces of focus. One, primarily affordability, right? But looking at it from the full spectrum of affordability, we're talking 80 below, because we need to make sure that we have this. And we'll go into kind of what that subset means here in a second. And then looking at, that 120, that 80 to 120, that middle income housing tranche. You'll see how we've started to break that down. We're still early yet. There's a positive here, but there's also, we're still in progress. We're talking about families. Obviously, we want families there. So we as we work through our programming and work through our considerations, we really, really focus around how do we have a project? How do we create a project that has the right mix and the right mix of amenities and services that really instill and inspire families to want to be here? Accessibility. And that also includes families as well as district staff. We know that if, like, take my brother-in-law, for instance, you can't afford to live within a reasonable amount of space from where you work, it's probably not going to be a place you stay long enough. And so if they can't hire teachers, and there is, knock on wood, continued growth, then we got another problem there too. Accessibility. I think this is one of the things we have a great team that we get to really think critically about the core elements of this project that we want to be the most considered about. Accessibility is huge. We want to make this a place that is not only accessible, it's accessible to all. It's accessible to the community that exists there. It's accessible to the community that will become part of that project, accessible to those of all varying different abilities. We would really like to make that the gold standard. And last, resiliency and sustainability, bringing our 30 years of expertise in environmental sustainability and really focus in, because as we all talked about earlier, not only do we have declining enrollment because we've got a lot of folks moving there and the average age is going up, as Mary talked about earlier, 2,500 homes gone from the county. Those don't exist anymore. So we're working at it. We were already working at a loss. We're working at an even bigger deficit. These are some of those goals and how we've worked to articulate those. Looking at AMIs, again, we'll be brief here. I know it's late, guys. When you look at Ashland, Ashland is 81,000 is your 100% of median income. Your actual market rents are typically more like 60 to 90, depending on the unit size. But you're talking $500,000 plus for single family. So we're focused on we're looking at each of these income streams and these different AMIs and saying, all right, where do we need to focus? How do we break down the site based upon, from a capitalization standpoint, how do we think about what are the tranches we need? Do we go out for tax credits? Do we do a middle income tranche? Do we do other things? We've gotten a little creative with that. So we look at the average household for folks moving into Southern Oregon. It's typically between $50,000 to $60,000 a year. That's like 65 to 80% of median income. Average district, about 40 to 70%, 50 to 90% of median income. So we know that we're going to need to serve from like a baseline 50 to 90% of median income. There is a tranche beyond that, especially in the home ownership side. And that's largely just like on the multifamily rental side, we're going to be capped to what the market is. There just isn't a lot of multifamily product. So we don't have a big kind of swath of things to showcase in terms of multifamily. But on the for sale side, we are looking at an opportunity there to provide housing from 100 to 120% of median income through the land trust, which is a really, really cool partnership. I talked a little bit about overcoming challenges. One of the things, so we're in the process right now of doing our community-led design process. The fact that it's taking up a resource that is not utilized, but yet could potentially be utilized for soccer, which is great. I'm saying not knocking soccer, has pitchforks and torches. Yeah, we have maybe not that bad. Well, we'll find out next week when we do a big community presentation for everyone. But it is there's definitely a lot of heat in the community around this resource and really thinking about it critically. So as we work, and what we're in the process of doing right now is working with the community, working with stakeholders. We want their feedback so that we can design a project that is the most responsive to the community we're trying to serve, both today and into the future. We want to hear those wants and needs and desires. We want to also help people articulate who are we trying to serve and how are we trying to serve those. Really distilling down into, I wish I had a little lasery thing here, distilling down into what does that mean? If we're trying to serve, say 30, 40% of median income up to about 120, I bet this is like direct, like these are direct jobs in Ashland and the various different economic tranches. I bet if I stood up there and said, I bet at least one person who does one of these jobs. I mean, I think one of these guys actually works at Shakespeare Festival. I'm sure people know that individual. We're really trying to put a human face on it. Let people know there is who we are trying to serve are here, and they may not be here if we don't find options for them. Like I said, the three tranches we'll be looking at tax credits for a good portion of it, given the fact that the largest majority is going to be somewhere between, we'll do an income average type of a deal, somewhere between that, call it 40, 50% of median income to 80% of median income. We are looking at, and Trell, we're going to talk about this afterwards. We established a 501c3, the Northwest Community Housing Trust, that allows us through our 501c3 designation, we can issue double tax exempt bond financing, which we've been doing in a number of different municipalities throughout the Pacific Northwest. The goal being that we can fund 100% of the project through double tax exempt bonds that are typically akin to, say, current interest rates less 150 to 250 basis points, and that's your all-in capital. So you're able to have a far cheaper cost of capital to actually fund middle-income housing. Once those bonds are serviced, the not-for-profit owns it outright, so it protects and preserves affordability in perpetuity. And then lastly, working very closely with the Housing Land Trust to determine a affordable home ownership model. And this is our project. And this is the last thing I'm going to say. Yeah. Thank you.
Hey everyone. So I think from just listening to our amazing speakers, can we give them one more round of applause for being here? Thank you all. You can probably come up with some ideas of maybe some things that would be helpful. Cutting chain link fences is one of them that comes to my mind. But by talked together, I would say we're all busy, and so we exchanged lots of emails, but we kind of came up with a list of several different things that we could propose for y'all to think about. And I kind of wanted, Krista, this was where some of the confusion was. I wanted you to kind of lead this off a little bit, talk about and re-emphasize some of our proposed solutions, and then I'll take it off further.
Okay, right. So I kind of, there are everything that's built is built because a lot of decisions were made, right? And so historically, there have been decisions made about what is built and how and why for very specific reasons that don't necessarily apply anymore, or don't serve the communities that they're in. And again, I'm going to plug occupational therapy. One of the things that we are really good at is looking at unconventional ways to solve problems. That's a lot of what we do is we just look at, well, what is the issue? What are the resources that are available? How are we all willing to be flexible? And, what ways can we stretch ourselves to solve this problem? And so that's why I say, if we think beyond traditionally held ideas about the roles of community institutions, school districts are, yes, they're for educating our kids, but they're also a place of community and of support and childcare and food resources and healthcare and mental health support and so many things. And I recognize that educators are so overwhelmed these days, but our kids still need us. And so I'm just so excited about this opportunity for Ashland to come together to support the kids that need us, and support the school district, because like I said, that was one of the reasons why this nonprofit was formed, because the school district does not have the resources to pursue this project. So all of the feasibility, everything that's been done to get to this point has been at no cost to the school district. So that's where we're converting, underutilized school district land. California School Board Association has taken off with this in the last year. They have a map on their website they can look at that they've mapped all of the underutilized school district owned land in California. So I would guess developers are looking at that and wondering how they can, like with the guidelines that Trell presented, like look at these properties and see how they can be developed. I would love to see something like that in Oregon. Just something to promote the cross-pollination and ideas happening. The other piece that I put up there was consulting or partnering with other community-based organizations. Like I said, Oregon Child Development Coalition is a cornerstone of this project, because of what they provide to the community, to the families, and particularly families and individuals that are historically underserved in our community. Half of OCDC's current enrollees in the Ashland program are farm workers. And I bet most people in Ashland don't even know that farm workers live in our community. And they also provide early infant and toddler and early childhood care to 30% of their enrollees have a disability. And it's really hard to find support for young kids who have any form of disability in Southern Oregon. It's really, really hard. So the fact that OCDC has that base and that connection and that passion is something that we want to bring further into the community. And so that's why they're such a significant partner. Also, the piece that I mentioned about our connection, our conversations with our representative, as was talked about earlier, changes in legislation are what we need to help kind of support these unconventional ideas to support our communities moving forward, whether it's response to disasters or the changing needs of our community. It's the collaboration we need. So there you go.
I have my own mic.
Oh, sorry.
That was perfect. Thank you, Krista. And I should have mentioned a database of underutilized school district owned land. That sounds like a fantastic student GIS project, maybe.
Let me know if you want a connection at ESRI.
There should be.
If you work in GIS, you probably know what that is, hopefully.
Okay, well, there should have been one more slide. Oh, I see here. Okay, okay. So I clicked it, and I just didn't realize it. So we're going to go on a couple other solutions. So we did talk a little bit about legislation as an example, and I don't know all of the details of it. This is not my expertise. But for example, there was a by right for faith-based organizations to develop affordable housing. And what this means is anywhere in Oregon right now, if you are a church and you have a wonderful underutilized parking lot, great graded, you can build by right affordable housing on that. So something like that for school district property, where again, there are plenty of schools which have huge parking lots. If they're being utilized, maybe they don't have to be in quite the way they are. So there's a lot of land that perhaps if that was made by right, that you could build affordable housing on there, we could utilize that. It's something also to think about as schools as a taxpayer resource. So right now we've talked a lot about schools that need to increase enrollment, but there are a lot of schools that are doing very, very well. And they're not being perhaps as fully utilized as they should be. So we talk a lot about transportation corridors, about commercial uses, and then putting housing in proximity to those uses. And something I wanted maybe put in your minds is if we have schools and we want to talk about safe routes to schools, well, the safest route to a school, as long as there's no chain link fence there, is a very short sidewalk to more dense housing, right? So why aren't we building more dense housing options around schools for families so that these kids can get safely to school, so that there is a source of housing so that school students can attend these both high performing schools and schools that maybe need a little bit more enrollment? And furthermore, why aren't we considering school performance with an equity lens when we're looking at housing production strategies? If we want people to have access to employment and we want people to have access to transportation and we're building family housing, shouldn't part of that be a consideration of not only how far away the schools are, but how are they performing? And if these families are going to need additional resources to support those students, I mean, Northwest Housing Alternative does a fantastic job of supporting their students, but perhaps they wouldn't have to be spending all of that money and time and resources if the school was able to do that themselves, right? And so there is a cost to having to support students in a school district that perhaps isn't performing as well as they would like to due to external factors. And finally, we know that housing is connected to real estate. As a parent who has a child who my husband is not convinced, but I am convinced is special needs. We've had to consider thinking about, well, if they go to public school where we initially intended them to go to public school, we don't think they're going to do very well. So what's the cost of a private education versus a tutor versus moving somewhere that we don't want to go to so that they have the resources? And we're very fortunate to have and be considering that option, but many people do not have that option. And so you can think about that dichotomy from a parent's perspective and how that influences patterns of both where people live and taxpayer bases, but also what type of housing people are going to purchase or buy, and how that creates systems of inequities. And so our really big takeaway here is just that let's talk about this, right? Let's talk to teachers, let's talk to educators, let's talk to developers, let's talk to school districts and get a conversation going so that we have a larger advocacy base and that we can actually work together to get things done. So thank you to our wonderful panelists. And I think we actually have, oh my goodness, we have some time for questions. So if anybody is curious about anything.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I think I turned it off.
Anyone have questions for the panel?
Hi, thank you. My name is Neil Baird. I work for OHCS DRR with the wonderful Mary who presented earlier. And so my role, I spend a lot of time throughout the state in all the disaster affected areas. And one that I've lived in and worked in as a former educator, teacher, all the things at a small school up into principal. So I'm super excited about what you're talking about. I have a superintendent literally last week asked me, they own property, how do they go about developing it? So my question is, which one of you do I connect with that superintendent? And he'll be calling you.
You might have a fight on your hands about that one, actually.
I think it may be all of you, but And yeah, so this is like super exciting. I know the majority of the fire affected communities like Mill City and Lincoln City, these things could be super impactful. So yeah, super excited about all the things. And then who do I call?
No, that's great. Call all of us. Yeah. We are eager, all of us are eager to engage with school districts because of the nexus like this conversation talks about, but also because frankly, access to any land right now is land is a premium.
Yeah.
And if you're working with an organization that is mission aligned, purpose aligned, like a school district, for example, makes it so much easier. So yeah, feel free to introduce.
I was going to say, this is a group of people who like to solve problems. And so sitting down, listen, I mean, that's been like the best part of, I'm sure similarly with you and your work, like some of the best part is actually sitting down and hearing directly what are these challenges that we're facing and then starting to tackle, because each community is different. Each community has its own nuances, its own problems, its own challenges. And I think that's like it's so awesome to work uh alongside groups that are willing to want to get in there, get their hands dirty, and go and say, how can we help find answers to the challenges you face? I think, talking to Krista, I mean, it's a really unique situation there where you have a school district that said, let's help facilitate and articulate and better articulate those challenges through a not-for-profit entity that can be both an advocate to us, but also be a support system for, a group coming in to help deal with those challenges. That's like, it makes it even more easy for groups like us to say, yeah, like we have there's a like a three-legged stool, like this very firm partnership that helps bring the project forward. So yeah, we're all here. We have a public design meeting. It's like a community-led design, a public forum
In Ashland, yeah.
It's on Thursday between 4 and 6
At the high school.
at the high school.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be fun. We did, like, my father-in-law will be there. We have some good folks in there who are like on the positive side. Yeah. I know I was joking about the pitchforks, but it was funnier at the time.
I did hear there was a sign with bloody handprints that said
Don't go on to
our soccer
Ashland's.
fields or something like that.
Don't go on to next door. Don't do it. No one ever should go on next door for all reasons, but don't do it. Yeah. It's not great.
I know Marcus wasn't on this panel, but he's also on our school board. He works for COCC, but he's on the Ben Lapine school board. And Ben Lapine has surplused 2 properties for affordable housing development. And they are prioritized for school district employees. So they can apply first. They've already actually done all the fair housing stuff first because I advised them they might want to do that. And so they have been able to make those priorities through fair housing guidance from Relman and Colfax in DC, which is kind of a national go-to for all things fair housing. And if anyone wants to talk to Marcus, I can get you in touch, or even anyone that was part of that school district surplus. I'm happy to do that. One unique thing, though, I think, is how difficult it is for school districts to do property tax exemptions for affordable housing development, or for even tax increment financing, or for some of those property tax exemption tools. And so there are some bills this legislative session that you might want to be aware of that can pay back or reimburse developers for SDCs or other types of like tools that school districts or other special districts are having a difficult time foregoing for housing. So you might want to support those bills.
We got time for 1 or 2 more. Anyone in the room?
If that's it, I think Jennifer might have, oh, okay, she's gonna mention it. Never mind. I won't steal her thunder, but thanks again to our wonderful panelists. Thanks all for sticking around.
Thank you all.